Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
I'm very compassionate to what's happening upstate. And I'm very compassionate to what's happening downstate.
Hello and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Liz Koenig. Today we're going to be discussing gang violence. We'll also be talking about some events which are coming up in the 57th Assembly District. And joining me to discuss these topics is Assemblyman Walter Mosley, who represents the 57th Assembly District in Brooklyn. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Liz.
Always great to see you, and we appreciate you coming in. We are in the off-session period of the year, which does not mean that you're not working, obviously, because you're back in the district and you're busy as can be, as you know, we're going to be talking about. First, we want to talk about this tragic event that happened in the Bronx, dealing with a young man, a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what happened?
I think June 23rd, a young man who was mistakenly identified by a sister, allegedly of one of the perpetrators who was a part of a gang, identified this young man as being someone who had a encounter with his sister that was subsequently posted on social media. And this sister identified this young boy, knowing that she was identifying someone who wasn't the actual person she had an encounter with. And he was tracked down and hunted like an animal in the Tremont section of the Bronx, and was dragged out and was hacked with machetes and knives and stabbed and left to bleed, and eventually would die of his wounds, literally 4 or 5 blocks down the block from St. Barnabas Hospital, which you can literally see from the store front location, where he could have been saved, but because of the wounds, they were too grave. And unfortunately, this young boy at the age of 15 loses his life because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and knowingly misidentified as someone who had an encounter with another young person. Tragic story. It could have been any of our children, particularly in the downstate region. Many of us who have children of color, young boys. My son is 11. He could have been identified as this person looking at him. Same features, same hair texture. So this past weekend, I just went up to pay my respects, had a long meeting with the borough president of the Bronx, Ruben Diaz Jr., who has been able to keep the community together. And it's just a tragic story all around. Unfortunately, the people who are going to have to pay for this are going to lose out on their life, their liberties and their freedoms. The family that has to endure this pain, and how would they lose a son of this nature, and at the age in which they lose them, and this, I guess, the constant reminder, because it's a very publicized event, and to see that over and over again. The makeshift monument to him is enormous. What happens to the store once this all kind of passes and washes away? A person probably will not be able to even open that store up again. So they lose their livelihood. But we're working with the DA's office in Brooklyn on an initiative that would allow for safe havens for young people to go into, and to properly train store owners and as to when a child or anyone needs emergency assistance, and they can't retrieve a police officer on site, where they can find some type of an area in which they can find safety while they're looking for the assistance of law enforcement. So this is an initiative that was initially created by Ken Thompson, the former DA of Brooklyn, and we're looking to reinstitute it so that we can never have another scenario like this ever again. The store owner wasn't properly trained. He didn't know what to do. And I know a lot of people are blaming him for this young man's death, but you can't blame him. He wasn't the one who was stabbing him. He wasn't the one who drug him out. But if we could have this person would have been properly trained, had direct access to law enforcement or a district attorney's office, maybe it would have been the difference between life and death for Junior.
Are we seeing this sort of senseless violence more often now with gangs? It's really taken me back with the circumstances surrounding this, and the store owner, like you said, nobody knows how you're going to react in that situation.
Right.
You know.
Well, no violence makes sense when you're particularly talking about gang violence, because you can never justify taking someone's life or someone losing their life through gang culture. It's just unacceptable. It can never be tolerated. But at the same time, it's a reality. And what we need to do is continue to open up avenues of opportunities for young people to be in places where they can be productive, where they can be, where they can kind of fight back the temptations of the streets and of gang activity. And we always have to remain constant that it could impact our young people regardless if they're in a gang or not. Junior was a member of the auxiliary NYPD. He wanted to be a police officer. So this is a kid who was really doing all the right things in his life, affiliated with the right people, good family upbringing, but yet was still a victim to senseless gang violence.
It's incredibly sad.
Yeah.
Our condolences go out to his family, of course. I do want to move on now and talk about immigration has been a hot button issue across the nation.
Yeah.
And you recently had an opportunity to participate in a march, Keeping Families Together march.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's interesting because it was both weekends. I went to Junior's makeshift memorial in the Bronx the morning after, and you only kind of get the correlation between the two in terms of how children are treated here. And what they have to go through, and then children who want to come here, or families who want to bring their children here, and how they're treated. And unfortunately, how we treat children and how we use children, as pawns, whether we're talking about health care, universal health care, whether we're talking about immigration reform, or whether we're talking about border patrol, how children are being used like chess pieces to effectuate or to reinforce public policy. I think it's shameful. It's something that we shouldn't. We're better than that as a country, and that I can only imagine. I can't even fathom, someone taking my children away from me and sending them thousands of miles away, then not even knowing, if they're ever going to come back. Many of these children can't even speak, unless speak English. So how do we communicate with them, or how do they communicate with us in terms of telling us where they're from, what's their family affiliation, what's the name of their mother and or father. So I hope that the Congress continues to rectify this matter, and we tend to move faster when we're under duress, and I hope that in doing so we can reconnect these children who are as far away from their parents in the state of Washington to New York, while parents are languishing in border security in Southern California or in the southern panhandle of Texas. It's unfathomable what's happening, but we have to do our part as citizens to be civilly disobedient, while at the same time understanding that even in our own discomfort, there are people who are facing a level of discomfort that is you couldn't even think of trying to replicate. So we hope that the administration continues to listen to the Congress and to the people to try to make this wrong all right.
And we've heard a couple of stories in the news recently about they're beginning to reunite these kids with their parents, but it's got to be a nearly impossible task, as you mentioned, with these children not really being able to communicate.
Correct.
Look,
do we hope that we'll have 100% success? Obviously, we're going to strive for that, but in this day and age when technology is used for so many ways in terms of tracking packages, tracking information, algorithms, and the like, yet we couldn't find ways in which we are going to be tracking, individuals, and then the need to send these individuals and separate them apart from one another and put thousands of miles of distance between the two, and then not having the ability to reconnect them with just one scan of a barcode or, you know, inputting of, you know, simple data and information. To me, you know, you have to kind of question what was the original intent and whether or not the consequences of not thinking this through, you know, what was it intentional or not, in an effort to score some type of points outside of the purview of government policy and how we govern as a nation. So we hope to get 100%, have 100% success. A lot of us believe we won't. And then regardless of whether you reconnect these children or not, a lot of these children and family will deal with trauma, you know, that could impact them for the rest of their lives, particularly those who are very young and who will have this image and of being separated from their parents, and then not knowing the anxiety of whether or not they're going to be reconnected. And that's the unfortunate consequences of poor public policy and poor planning and poor preparation.
We as citizens need to remain vigilant and make sure that all these children are reunited with their families. Very difficult story. But I want to move on and talk about some events that you have coming up in the district. Walk with Walter Wednesdays. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, we thought we needed to like add to my ability to be touched by my constituents. So, you know, obviously we have other events we'll touch upon later, but you know, sometimes just people just want to see you walking through the neighborhood. And so we said, let's pick some very busy corridors in the district and visit our merchant owners and store owners and storefronts and you know, small businesses, and let's walk them, you know, and let people know when we're going to be out there, between what time, you know, what corridor, between what streets, and between what cross streets, and let people have the ability to, you know, either just meet you for the first time if they're new residents, or bring up issues that may be just germane to their particular block or building, or just pitch an idea or a piece of legislation. So we're looking forward to that. That's going to be sometime in the fall when the weather's not as hot, but you know, we don't hit the winter months, and that'll be like right before we get prepared for the holidays. Sure. And then going off the session, where my constituents obviously don't get to see me or many of my colleagues that much, since we spend so much time up here in Albany from January to June, which many of my constituents don't understand, that they don't see me at particular meetings because, you know, we're away from our district, our communities, our families. So we're looking forward to that.
Okay, we're going to be talking about some more of those on our next show. So,
thank you. Thank you.
We've been speaking with Assemblyman Walter Mosley, who represents the 57th Assembly District in Brooklyn. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.